tropics have all of us on edge as forecasts for future Hurricane Imelda teeter between expected outcomes. As with every day that comes, model runs are showing some important changes. The past 2 days we saw a tug-of-war between a possible landfall along the east coast versus a recurvature out to sea. This morning the data is much clearer as we get closer to the date of impact in the US, and seemingly the models are more confident on a recurvature. I'll walk you through what's changed, what hasn't, and why the Carolinas still need to be watching closely. Hey there, my name is Eric. I'm an aspiring meteorologist currently working my way towards my atmospheric science degree. I would like to mention before proceeding that if you like this kind of content, consider subscribing. Also leave a like if you end up finding this video helpful in the end. And when you subscribe, enable notifications so you can stay up to date on all the important weather information. The date is September 27th, 2025, and we're going to begin with a present look at what is now Tropical Depression 9 and soon to be Tropical Storm Imelda as it makes its way closer to the US coast. Just upon a quick gander, you can see pretty much what is still kind of a sloppy looking system, but compared to the last day or so, it's definitely starting to look more characteristic of a tropical cyclone. We have some thunderstorms concentrated here near the center of circulation, which is becoming more defined, but a lot of the thunderstorms are still pretty scattered and disorganized throughout this entire system here. And Cuba and the Dominican Republic, as well as Haiti, are currently experiencing probably the worst of the impacts that they're going to get from this storm, which will continue over the next probably nearly day. The Bahamas are next in line, and the southern Bahamas are actually already beginning to experience some of those impacts, and they are currently under tropical storm warnings. In its closest vicinity, this storm has a lot of moisture to work with. There's only a little bit of dry air in areas to the west and then off to the northeast in the Atlantic. So you can expect that this thing will kind of keep its momentum from this point forward. There's not really much stopping it. Between now and when it gets to just off the coast of South Carolina, which will enable it to become the forecast hurricane that is expected. However, in just a minute, we will take a look at the reasons why the storm is going to be rebuked, if you want to say, and why we may end up with just a close call rather than a direct impact. I want to observe Humberto real quick, Hurricane Humberto, because as someone fascinated by these amazing phenomena that are hurricanes, just seeing this, I mean, this is a, pardon my lack of professionalism here, but a sexy hurricane. I guess that makes me sound kind of weird, but I mean, it is symmetrical, it's alive, it's got a very defined core, pretty solid eye. It is currently a Category 4 hurricane. Earlier we had forecasts for it to become a Category 5, but it is now only expected to become a Category 4. The Category 5 forecast wasn't surprising just because of what I was seeing with the models and how it was starting to portray a pretty rapid intensification. You can see we're getting closer to that point when these two storms are going to start interacting with each other and deciding each other's fate. What will soon be Imelda, going into the very end of today or likely early tomorrow, will become a Category 1. Likely at most, but we need to keep an eye on change in forecasts as we could potentially see a Category 2 as some models are agreeing. Why is Humberto so successful? Well, just much like future Imelda, there's not really much stopping it. I mean, it is a beautiful looking system, and you can see there is dry air in the immediate environment outside of the storm itself, but it is managing to keep a lot of that out. A lot of that is probably lower level dry air. Getting a broader look here at water vapor content, you can see this is mid-level, and actually there's even less dry air around the system in the mid-level, so that's actually a good thing for the storm if it wants to stay solid. As of now, there are no other highlighted areas of concern. There does seem to be probably a tropical wave here off the coast of Africa, but the National Weather Service is not emphasizing that, and models do not show any development out of that. So really, it's just these two systems that we need to keep an eye on, especially as Imelda makes its way up close to the coast of the United States, and Bermuda needs to keep an eye on Humberto as it makes a veer around Bermuda potentially with closer impacts than we'd want. Further down the line, Imelda might actually become a concern for Bermuda as models are showing it taking a shift in course just like this as it gets caught by the trade wind, or not the trade winds, the westerlies. So what does today's data tell us about Imelda's track? Both the Euro and GFS models are leaning toward Imelda curving offshore before South Carolina landfall, thanks to a shortwave trough digging into the southeast and the added influence of Humberto further out in the Atlantic. But that doesn't mean that it's a free pass. The Carolinas are still looking at flooding rain, storm surge, and coastal impacts even without a direct landfall. The Euro model is painting a wetter picture with more widespread rainfall across the Carolinas, suggesting flooding concerns could be underestimated right now. I personally think that both models are actually probably pretty conservative about what's really going to happen. The GFS keeps rainfall more confined to the storm's core, but also depicts a stronger system, dropping as low as 968 millibars. That may play out actually as it gets further out to sea, but that would flirt with Category 2 strength. But that would be further offshore. So it's a split. Euro says broader flooding rain. GFS says stronger storm just offshore. Looking at broader synoptic features interacting with this storm, both models show Imelda interacting with a surface front draped across the southeast. This is associated with a shortwave trough that has been making its way east throughout the United States the past few days. That boundary gives the storm its escape route, but it also acts like fuel for heavy rain. Even if the center stays just offshore, Imelda's moisture gets pulled into that front, amplifying the rain threat inland. This is a setup that can produce nor'easter-like effects on top of tropical storm hazards. Now I want to go ahead and sit here with you looking at these runs live. Here's the Euro model. This run was from hours ago. It was the first run of the day, and this kind of had me feeling a little bit better as it makes its way closer to South Carolina. It eventually makes that veer that the models are not expecting. It intensifies as it goes out, but then gets caught by shear and then essentially disappears. The latest Euro run shows pretty much a very similar thing here. You can see the models are really confused because they don't normally work with something like this where two storms are interacting so closely, and it doesn't really want to designate a low pressure system to this storm. But here it makes its way east and stays a little bit more intense and kind of hesitates a bit on continuing west, and then actually starts to meander a bit more towards the coast. That's just the Euro model. Let's take a look at the GFS. You can see it's doing a pretty similar thing, but the GFS takes it pretty far out, but then starts to tug it back west, but then takes it up and gets it caught by the westerlies. I've actually had my eyes on this. Over Central America and the Caribbean, there's this little low pressure system, broad low pressure system that probably is spit out by the Central American gyre. While this is really far out, probably worth keeping an eye on. This is the Euro ensemble, and as you can see, it really heavily agrees on that new turn out to sea, but I'd say it's probably split 30-70, maybe 40-60 with between making a direct impact to South Carolina or Georgia or even North Carolina, or just going out to sea. This is the GFS, and I'd say it's about the same, but there are some things here that really have my attention. Some of those closer to mean models show the storm at a actually higher intensity than what is forecast if it were to hit South Carolina, going through the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And if I had to estimate that particular run is probably more likely than some of these other ones, like especially some of these outliers right here. Ones more towards the center are more likely, but that doesn't mean that any of these outside models are to be ruled out, because every one of these should be considered. I think the worst case scenario would be, I think at this point, we're seeing an increasing likelihood of the worst case scenario being an impact to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Beyond that, if it weren't that, a more likely worst case would be an impact to Georgia or South Carolina. So actually, putting simply, this would be the worst case scenario, but it's not as likely. Now I want to take a look at storm surge real quick. That's currently expected for Charleston and some parts of the coast of South Carolina. As you can see, it's pretty minimal. Blue is greater than 1 foot above the ground, and then yellow is greater than 3 feet above the ground. This is running through Saturday into Wednesday, so today into Wednesday. So I guess we'll start seeing, maybe we'll start seeing coastal erosion impacts today as swells start making their way up the coast. It says Saturday through Wednesday. Today is Saturday, but I don't think that we're seeing much of anything directly in South Carolina just yet. This is probably just how they make this product, but this is still important to consider, especially for low-lying areas, the beach. You can see areas near Charleston proper that are low-lying could see actually some of the worst storm surge. Nothing devastating, but it could still cause some problems, so keep an eye on that. I'm now going to sit with you in the accumulated precip model, and as we go further along, you can see we start to get some accumulated precip over the Carolinas, and this goes as far as October 9th here. That's the frame that we're at. You can see just before the storm makes its way, its closest approach, we start seeing some accumulation in the Carolinas. And then as it gets closest, it starts interacting with those surface features, which is what's going to allow for that potentially damaging flooding rain, and even dangerous. So it's worth it to be safe rather than sorry when it comes to the rain threat, because I think with that's going to be the biggest issue. As I said, the Euro shows a more concentrated core, and most of the precipitation being concentrated around the coast, with still a decent amount a little ways inland, which can cause, like I said, mudslides and flooding. I'd say we're probably not at the threshold in the Appalachians, besides some parts of Virginia, where we're going to probably have to start being concerned about mudslides. The Appalachians are expecting probably up to 2 inches of rain in some spots locally. So I'd say that's a concern worth noting. So again, don't let your guard down, especially with the flooding rain. I want to emphasize with what the Euro is showing us here, even if this storm does not make direct landfall, which is still a possibility and should not be thrown out the window yet, this here is pretty concerning. And as I said, this I think is conservative, and I think we're going to be seeing more rain than what's expected here with this model. So I would expect more than this, and those of you on the coast, I would be really weary, especially in low-lying areas. Sometimes you get these storms, even tropical storms, either hurricanes that just don't make a direct impact, or tropical storms, which are not as powerful, that can still cause such devastating flooding. You saw that with Allison in 2001 when it hit Houston, and I mean, that was like one of the worst flood events in Houston's history, and that was just a tropical storm. So no matter what strength the storm is at, you need to just be wary of it, because they all bring the same potential threats. Some threats greater than others depending on the storm and the setup. We're going to look at near surface wind. Now you can see, even with Imelda staying mostly offshore, some of those higher winds will actually make it pretty close to shore. This is what's going to allow for that storm surge. With Umberto, you can see it makes it pretty close to Bermuda, enough to the point to where tropical storm force winds are a pretty marginal concern at this point, and they're currently, last I checked, at about 60 to 70% chance of experiencing those as it passes by. And that can change as the forecast goes on. We may even see that hurricane core gets closer to the island, so Bermuda needs to be on the lookout as well. Now, according to GFS and wind impacts, as far out as Bermuda with Imelda, not as much of a concern, but still something that you should watch closely, because this is pretty far out and this can change dramatically. The GFS thinks Imelda is going to linger a lot around here and probably kind of tease Bermuda a bit with 2 different close calls in its wind field. This right here would probably be the height of the impact, but I want to note that this frame is the last most reliable hour for the GFS. Everything beyond this is mostly speculative. So pretty far out. Again, just keep an eye out and stay up to date on the forecasts, which you can do here if you subscribe and enable notifications. I want to keep you safe, and I also enjoy doing this. It's my passion. So closing for a synopsis of the tropics, Imelda is more likely to stay offshore, but don't let that fool you. Flooding, rains, and coastal impacts are still on the table for the Carolinas. I'll keep tracking how the models shift in the next 24 hours, especially with that frontal boundary in play. Returning home, we're going to take a look at the likely outcome in the next 3 days. Tying into the tropical analysis, from now, Saturday into Sunday, the East Coast can expect actually a decent amount of rainfall. That might back off a bit, but it won't last long as Imelda makes its way closer to the coast. And like I said, that threatening rain is going to begin. Honestly, you should just expect the next week to be pretty rainy, at least into Thursday. If the storm doesn't make a direct impact to land, which is still possible, we're at the tail end of that trough that has been passing through, and that is what recently brought the weather to the Carolinas, and that's what's going to continue to fuel that sort of surface interaction with Imelda. As we finish off the weekend, that carries north and generally still dominates the East Coast, and that is what will start to drag Imelda that way. But the stronger part of that, which meets up with the jet stream up north, is what's going to start pulling Imelda out east, as well as Umberto, which will kind of keep Imelda in its place. Now, I am really happy about this. Yesterday, we saw some really, really nice weather. The humidity was low as 47%, according to my at-home weather station. We have gone a bit back up with dew point, but honestly, this is pretty graceful for southeast Texas. We are just we are just barely free of that muggy weather, and actually, as we continue on, we'll start to see a bit more dry air going into Monday and even further into the week. Actually, going into October, we're going to see nicer weather, and I'm actually really excited for that. I woke up this morning and I went outside and it was 64 degrees. It was a bit humid still. You know, there was condensation everywhere, dew on the ground, but my car just, you couldn't even see the inside of my car because of how much condensation there was. But it was still nice. It was still a relief from what we've been getting. That being said, most of the center, the heartland of the country, is going to see above average temperatures, even in Texas, while because of the events on the East Coast with Imelda, we're actually going to see below average temperatures, most likely because of cloud cover and the disbursement of that heat and absorption of it through the tropical system. Precipitation will be a little above average in the Northwest and the Midwest, and in the plains, near normal through California and in Southeast Texas, and it'll be a bit dry going from parts of the Southwest up into the extreme Northeast, which will actually be nice for the Southwest because Arizona and New Mexico just got that really bad rain event, so they don't need any more rain as it is. Furthermore, temperature anomaly runs reinforce that trend, but you can still see in Southeast Texas those nicer temperatures generally. But as we go into October, it'll actually start heating up a little bit relatively, but I think it's still going to be a bit nicer. And you can see the East Coast cooling is evident. As we go into October, there is an expected trough and low pressure system that will make its way through the plains in the Midwest that we do want to keep an eye on because that can bring some severe weather. And this right here is so far ahead. This is worth considering. This could happen, but it's so far out, and we'll just have to keep analyzing it as we get closer. But this would be really nice here. This would be our first round of real fall air that you usually get in October. And man, if this really happens, I will be dancing outside with my warmer clothes on, which I'll be happy to wear. Just look like an absolute goober. Just so happy that we're finally starting to see that fall weather. I am outside. I am chronically outside when it starts getting that cool. I absolutely love it. This is today, Saturday's high temperatures. That is a sign that things are cooling off. See, just a few weeks ago, we would have been in the upper 90s here in Southeast Texas. Lows are starting to get considerable, and then the highs for Sunday are about the same, maybe a little bit hotter. Sunday night, about the same. On Monday, it looks pretty much about the same. So you can kind of expect about the same trend throughout the rest of September. This is mostly typical weather, like I said, some areas above average. Now, present day rain events, most of that we are seeing on the East Coast. That's due to that trough that moved in. You can see there's scattered thunderstorms. Most of it is scattered thunderstorms. We do have a flash flood discussion here around the highest points of the Appalachians. We have some special weather statements for some of these severe thunderstorms. Some areas you can see are popping up a bit, but before Imelda makes its way up, a lot of this will make its way just along the coast, which is what's going to interact with Imelda. Everywhere else is pretty calm. Arizona and New Mexico have a little bit precipitation left because of the low pressure system and a dry line. There are flash flood reports still active. Something that I've started to do as I've kind of started utilizing these resources more. This is really cool. So on Radar Omega, you have access to buoy data out in the ocean. This was a little bit earlier, but you can see how just like absolutely ominous the ocean looks out there in those outer bands and kind of nearing the core of Umberto. You definitely would not want to be out there. To me, this image here is just kind of badass. I mean, imagine being out there. Imagine you find yourself stuck out on one of those buoys for some reason, or like lost at sea, and you're just witnessing the raw power of one of these absolute beasts. White caps and the atmosphere just absolutely splitting open. Sounds epic. I know I am weird. I get it. It's fine. You can call me weird. I am an anomaly myself, just like these storms. For Sunday's local weather, as I said, most of those scattered, some locally heavy thunderstorms are going to concentrate mostly along the very coastline, very edge of the East Coast. There's still some stuff to watch out here in the Southwest, actually, but mostly just scattered and locally heavy stuff. The heartland is mostly dominated by high pressure, so you're not going to see much out there, but there is a colder air mass out here that could later interact with future dynamics. Very far northwest can probably expect some rain. Maybe some of that will actually make its way into Seattle even. As we go into the beginning of the week, that front there is stationary, so that's probably going to prevent maximum activity, but probably just going to see a little bit going on out there. It looks like we do have a low pressure system here, so that's going to be funneling in moisture, which is what's causing that precipitation there. Monday, it is mostly going to be the same. Things are just going to continue moving east, and then Imelda will be making its way closer. Things are going to actually start getting a bit more active in the Pacific Northwest. We will see increased precipitation as a cold front moves in, and probably what will be one of those Pacific Northwest lows moving in. That concludes today's analysis. I will continue updating everything as we move forward in time. Remember not to take these warnings and forecasts lightly, even as things change. Also be kind to your weatherman, because, I mean, really, we're the professionals of being wrong all the time. But it's more than that. The weather's always changing, and we work with the best possible data in order to be prepared for whatever can happen. Better safe than sorry. I hope you found this video useful. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. And don't forget, you are the storm.